I never imagined that the footage I tried to capture that afternoon would become the last evidence of what happened. I wasn't documenting anything extraordinary, just trying to record the shifting light in the forest for a study project. It was a rarely used trail on Couts Ridge, on the southern slope of Mount Rainier, a dense and humid stretch with that strong scent of resin and wet earth that clings to your clothes. I arrived before sunset, while the air still held some warmth. The wind barely moved the fir needles, and the silence was so compact I could hear my own breathing bouncing off the trunks. I set the camera on the tripod and let it record while I took notes. Everything normal, nothing out of place. Until I heard what I thought was a deer. A dry, firm crack, like something heavy stepping on thick branches. I've seen enough large animals in forest zones to recognize their rhythms. But this was different. It didn't move with the erratic clumsiness of an elk or the lightness of a deer. It had a pattern, deliberate. I turned the camera off, packed the tripod carefully, and walked a few meters to listen better. Then, out of nowhere, came a smell I couldn't describe at the time. A mix of aged sweat, damp soil, and something like rusted iron. Organic, intense, almost bitter. The crack came again, this time closer. I pressed myself against the trunk of a huge cedar and tried to control my breathing. Then came a dull thud, like an enormous hand pushing another tree. The vibration reached my feet. When I barely poked my head out to look, I saw it. A silhouette, about 50 feet away, standing. It wasn't a bear. The shape was too tall, too straight. Its back was broad, covered in thick, dark hair. The arm it used to brace against a trunk was so long that its elbow sat near its waist. The movement lacked the awkwardness of an animal. It was intentional, as if it were evaluating its surroundings with purpose. I froze. The silhouette slightly turned its head. I couldn't see the full face, just the profile. A defined cheekbone, an oversized jaw, the subtle rise and fall of its breathing. But the worst part was the feeling that it knew exactly where I was. I didn't run, I didn't scream, I only took one step back, very slowly. And that single step was enough. The figure tensed like a compressed spring. In less than a second, the forest exploded with noise. Branches snapping, dirt scattering, leaves whipping as if caught in a sudden storm. It was coming toward me. The last thing I remember is a brutal hit to my shoulder, something enormous slamming into me, spinning me and knocking me down. My camera flew out of my hand. Then darkness. Not fainting, but darkness, as if something massive blocked out the light. A body over me. An overwhelming smell, an impossible strength. When I woke up hours later, I was alone, bruised, disoriented, and with the clear sense that I hadn't been the target. I had been a warning. My camera never turned up. Only the forest remained, and the silence, which I no longer interpret as calm, but as watchfulness. The final patrol shift I ever completed for the Park Service took place on the western edge of Mount Rainier near the old Cedar Ridge outpost. My name is Everett Hale, and I was only supposed to spend one night there, check a few climate sensors, log the data, and return the next day. Routine, something I had done dozens of times. But that night, the mountain decided to show me something that shouldn't exist. I reached the outpost at 7:40 p.m. Patches of snow clung to the roots of the firs, and the fog rose from the ravines like a thick blanket that seemed to swallow every sound. When I shut the outpost door, I realized the silence was absolute. No birds, no creaking branches, no wind, just my breathing. At 9:13 p.m., while adjusting a humidity sensor, I heard what I thought was an echo, a single sharp crack, like a trunk snapping. I ignored it at first, but then came another and another. Not in any natural rhythm, more like someone striking a tree deliberately with impossible force. I switched on my headlamp and stepped outside to check the perimeter. The beam barely cut through the fog. I walked a few meters, breathing deep to calm myself, until I heard something that raised every hair on my body. A footstep. Heavy, slow, then a second, then a third. I froze. The next step landed much closer. "Hello?" I called out, hating the tremor in my voice. No answer. I retreated toward the outpost. My hands were already searching for the firearm I had never once needed. When I closed the door, the impact came from behind the wall, a deep blow that made the structure tremble. I stayed absolutely still. At 10:47 p.m., the breathing started. Not mine, not human, a low, wet, animal-like exhale that was impossible to mistake. It was right outside the window, but nothing could be seen, only the fogging of the glass, as if something enormous was leaning against it. "Everett, calm down," I whispered to myself. The breathing stopped abruptly. Then silence. Then footsteps. Footsteps circling the outpost, slow, deliberate, like a predator sizing up its prey. I tried contacting base, but the radio spat only static. When I attempted to raise the antenna for a better signal, a foul stench seeped in through the cracked window, something between wet moss and rotting meat. And then I saw it. Through the half-open door, a silhouette moved between the trees, too tall to be human, too massive to be any known animal on Rainier. The worst part was how it moved, not clumsy, not like a bear, but with unsettling precision, as if making sure I saw only what it allowed me to see. Suddenly, it stopped. It turned its head, its shadow outlined faintly against the fog. I stepped back, but the door burst open as if slammed by a log. I didn't try to close it. I just ran for the back hallway. Something entered, something that smelled like a dead forest. I remember nothing after that. When I woke, daylight was coming in. The door was destroyed, and all around the outpost were enormous, deep tracks leading toward the ravine. Tracks suggesting that whatever it was had come for me and had simply decided it wasn't my turn yet. What happened that afternoon on Mount Rainier wasn't a vision or a direct attack. It was something far more unsettling, more calculated, as if whatever was in the forest had been assessing us long before we noticed it. There were 4 of us. Marissa walking beside me, adjusting her pack strap. Keegan studying the digital map with the arrogance of someone convinced he knew every trail. Talia listening to every sound with almost obsessive focus. And me, Holden, who felt the danger even before the forest gave its first warning. The fog was dropping fast, sliding through the firs as if it had a will of its own. The trail was narrow, bordered by thick roots pushing out of damp soil. There was something strange in the air, a heaviness, a faintly sweet smell, like wood left wet for too long. "Do you hear that?" Talia asked suddenly. Keegan let out a short laugh. "I don't hear anything." That was the problem. It was an unnatural silence, total. The kind of silence you're not supposed to find in a living forest. We continued a few more steps before the first sound hit. A sharp, brutal crack, like a tree trunk being snapped in half with impossible strength. Marissa turned instinctively, but the fog was so dense it barely allowed visibility for a few meters. "That wasn't the wind," I murmured. Keegan's annoyance vanished, replaced by unease, but the second sound ended any debate. Footsteps. Heavy, slow, as if something massive was moving among the trees without any intention of hiding its presence. Talia clenched her jaw. "Holden, it's following us." I didn't get a chance to reply. Something exhaled, not beside us, not far away, just behind the wall of firs. A deep, wet, resonant breath. The kind of breath that belonged to something far larger than anything native to Rainier. Marissa stepped back involuntarily. And then we saw it. Not a face, not a full body, just a fraction. A huge shoulder. A silhouette too tall for any person, too solid for any bear. Dark, motionless, watching us. There was something in its posture, as if it knew we'd noticed it and simply didn't care. "Don't run," I whispered, not even sure why I said it. But Keegan spun to move quickly down the trail and caught his foot on a root. The noise triggered everything. The forest erupted in a low, thunderous roar that froze my blood. The figure took one step toward us. The ground trembled, the fog peeled back just enough to reveal an immense arm, covered in dark hair, tensed as if ready to charge. We didn't wait. We ran. We didn't look back. We didn't speak. And even though we escaped, that thing's breath still follows me in every silence. I never thought a simple detour would damn us. The plan was to take the main Carbon River route, a familiar section of Rainier, but Beckett insisted on exploring a narrow gorge marked on an old map. Rowan agreed immediately, always hungry for lesser-traveled paths. Leanne, cautious, only said something in the air felt dense. I, Orla, let myself be carried by the absurd confidence of not believing in invisible dangers. 15 minutes after entering the gorge, the landscape changed in a disturbing way. The trees grew so close together their trunks looked fused. Light filtered through in thin lines. The ground was covered in a layer of dark mud that seemed to swallow sound. Rowan heard the first impact, a deep, metallic boom, like a tree hurled against another. It didn't fall, it didn't roll, it just struck. "That wasn't a rock slide," Leanne whispered. We kept going, but something began moving with us. Footsteps, enormous ones, not behind us, parallel, shifting between the trees at our pace. Every so often they stopped, and the silence that followed was somehow worse. Beckett lifted his headlamp to light the space between the trunks. The beam barely scraped across a massive shadow, upright, crouched. One arm shifted slightly. It was enough to make my heartbeat freeze. "It's not hiding," Rowan murmured. "It's measuring us." We kept walking because retreating seemed even more suicidal. But the trail tightened, the gorge narrowed, rock walls rose sharply on both sides. That was when it happened. A roar tore through the air like an explosion, so low the ground trembled. Something dropped from a rocky ledge with impossible speed. It wasn't a jump. It was a controlled fall, deliberate, like the thing had chosen the exact second to strike. The creature landed among us. I saw only a mix of shadow and dark hair, a torso as wide as two men. Leanne screamed. Rowan stumbled backward into the wall. Beckett raised an arm as if he could defend himself, but the creature slammed into him first. The sound of the impact was horrifying.
Beckett flew into the brush. He tried to stand, but an enormous arm, hair-covered, muscular, distorted with inhuman strength, grabbed him by the waist. And then I heard something that will haunt me forever. The hard snap of its claws digging into his clothes, and Beckett's broken scream turning into a choke. The creature dragged him into the dark of the forest as if he weighed nothing. We didn't run, we didn't react. It happened so fast we were paralyzed, staring as that thing carried our friend between the trees, leaving only the sound of his body scraping through the mud. When we regained control, we ran without looking back. We sought help. We returned with rangers, helicopters, floodlights. We didn't find Beckett, only marks in the mud, as if something massive had crawled toward the mountain, taking him with it.